Welcome to another live stream. We are going to talk about character assassination of targets. And, obfuscating the illegal activity is one of the high priorities of gang stalkers. And there's a lot of different things that can happen to targeted individuals. And I've mentioned before that, you could be some type of guinea pig, the subject of experimentation, collecting data. You could be the vessel of wrath. The people might be playing God with you. You could be dealing with an occult scenario. Doesn't really matter which option you choose. They have to break the law to do these things. In order to do so, in order to obfuscate and hide the illegal activity, they have to bastardize the character. They have to assassinate the character of the target. And there's a lot of different things that we've talked about concerning the science of gang stalking. And it all revolves around the same thing. It's that circular scenario that you get sucked into. It's the vortex of organized harassment. And, the beauty of it is that it's similar to quicksand, because you try to get away, you try to figure out what's going on, you try to stop the harassment, you try to get help, and you just end up making it worse most of the time for a lot of different reasons. And I've talked about that before, that the things that happen to targeted individuals are unorthodox. In other words, there doesn't seem to be a logical motive, right? You have people breaking into the target's house, and they're not stealing anything, or they're doing something that doesn't make sense. Someone, especially for the targets out there who have security systems, or they know what's going on, and they have these sophisticated locks or whatever, and somehow they get in there. But why, right? And you already look paranoid at that point. Well, they wanted to move, one of my figurines, from the top shelf over to the kitchen table, or they wanted to, switch something around in the refrigerator. Of course, there's a lot of things that go into that methodology, in the sense that when something like that happens, not only are they invading your space, and they're basically shattering the foundations of your security and that pyramid of life that we've talked about before. Where you have your shelter and so on and so forth. Now you don't know. I mean, if they've done something to the food, it just depends on the directed conversations in the street theater that around the scenario the target is dealing with. But once again, it just doesn't appear to be logical, right? Or the directed conversations that targets deal with. Sometimes it involves personal information. Sometimes it's just a way to accuse the targeted individual. In fact, I was talking to an individual earlier tonight, and they gave me a pretty good idea for some of the things we're going to discuss, in the sense that when a target does get accused of these things, a lot of times they will accuse a targeted individual of being a deviant or a drug dealer or whatever. And now you have to prove yourself. At least that's what you think. But in trying to remedy that scenario, what happens? The target just ends up looking guilty, right? We'll say that the individual is dealing with directed conversations and street theater and accusations involving some type of deviance, maybe drug dealing or something like that. Not only is a sensitization and those other amalgamated associations going to play within that framework, in the sense that they could just read into it too. And so the reciprocity is exponential. They hear somebody talking about drugs after they've been attacked with these directed conversations and so on and so forth. And they might think that they're perps. They might think they're in on it or whatever. And then they come out of the blue and start trying to defend themselves. They're just going to look like lunatics. We don't even know who you are, man. We were talking about his cousin just got busted with a bunch of meth, and he's up in prison now. I'm not talking, you're one of them. You're getting paid by the government or whatever. And so then you just look nuts. And so, there's a lot of different things in the science of gang stalking that will play in to the character assassination of targeted individuals. Sometimes it's very sophisticated. Sometimes it's primitive like that. So the directed conversations don't necessarily have anything to do with personal information that way. That'd be the cheap way to take care of it. A lot of targets will deal with the fact that they don't know if someone has broken into their house and installed cameras or bugged their phone or hacked their, something, their technology, dealing with electronic harassment or whatever. Maybe they've been stalking them. Maybe they've been watching them, profiling them, talking to people, whatever. That's really the thing that, that's the suggestion. In other words, when you're dealing with directed conversations and street theater that involve personal information, it's very devastating. And I think we had that up on one of the surveys. But you don't have to do that. All you have to do is create themes, right? And I've talked about the theme-based harassment involved that targets deal with. And these themes are out there everywhere, right? It doesn't matter. You can sensitize someone to just about anything. And I've talked about that before. Sensitization is a form of harassment involving subjective stimuli to create associations from actions, words, phrases, or environmental stimuli for covert harassment and communication with the targeted individual, or to create themes used in combination with trauma attack techniques for unconsensual invasion into their psyche and mind. And of course, like I said, the reciprocity is that individuals start reading into that, but it involves how they process information. So we'll say that you've got a group of thugs or perps, and that they want to freak you out or whatever. They just start making accusations along with the stimuli of accusing you of something, or people start treating you different, or you start to experience the sequelae and isolation of organized stalking. And a lot of targets will talk about that. Certain elements within their social circle change. Things happen within their familial circle. People start treating them differently in the most intimate ways that you can imagine. Or it just might be environmental. Maybe it's workplace harassment. And people start having an attitude. You start getting the stink eye. And then, all of a sudden, all these conversations about you dealing drugs pop up. But you don't know. You don't know. You're making that correlation, giving them plausible deniability, because if you say anything at that point, then you even look more paranoid. So the character assassination is something that they need to do. It is something that happens to all targeted individuals. It is something that is used to isolate them. It is something that is used to basically box them in, so that if they do try to get help, they're just going to look crazy. They are going to make it worse. And I've had a lot of people ask me, how do I get help? How long is this going to last? Should I tell people I'm a targeted individual? Is it, because there's people out there that will suggest that, maybe the cops are going to understand, or maybe you'll find a good psychiatrist who understands and believes this stuff. I've heard testimonies from people where they say that, their psychologist or therapist or whatever said they know that this happens, and they didn't really question them about it. But that would be pretty rare. And I don't even know if I believe that. That's like when you get into the targets that say that my gang stalking's over. Really? Okay. And then it's not that they are necessarily lying, but they're probably misperceiving the scenario depending on what they're dealing with harassment wise, right? Because they do change the stimuli. That's another part of the character assassination that goes along with the methodologies that we've talked about, because the target is flipping into that surreal framework where they are in control of what you're thinking about, about the vector of your thoughts and everything else. Because, you're playing that game. We're all kind of playing that game. I mean, life is like that. You have to survive. In order to do that, you have to interact with people. You have to, you have to fit within the mechanism of society in a way just to survive. And the next step after the target has become discredited, and that can go into other things, even involving people being infiltrated, and then possibly trying to get them committed to a mental institution, or at least nothing else on paper. Or maybe it's even more integrated, where an individual dealing with that type of familial harassment or people in their family, that at a young age they would take them into a psychiatrist or start gaslighting them or something else. Because now what happens, and this is a problem for a lot of targets, is that you can get evidence, but if you're on paper as needing psych drugs or being evaluated, and now with all the electronic records and everything, man, I mean, doctor shopping and all that stuff is over. That's the thing of the past now, right? Now everything that happens within your physician's office can be accessed probably by the police. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, guys, but they can see all that stuff. There's a dossier on you now, man, right? And the protocols have changed too. So if you open your mouth and say you don't feel safe, it's a full-blown investigation into you first. Because they ask you these questions, not everybody gets that, but you can see how psychiatry has invaded pretty much everything. It is used to discredit everybody, right? And the profit motive has corrupted that whole thing. And I'm not saying that there isn't legitimate, doctors out there who could help people. I'm just saying they're far and few between. They really are. Back when I had the tranquilizer addiction, what I ran into, I was having insomnia, then I was prescribed benzodiazepines, and then I started getting addicted, and I wasn't aware that you could literally become dependent on those things within 2 weeks, to the point where you're having anxiety, panic attacks, like panic disorder. And then when you go in to tell the doctor what's going on, they just say, "Oh no, you want to start taking you need to take it during the day now." I thought it was just at night. Well, it was. I said, "What's going on?" "Oh, now we're seeing all your mental illness come to the surface." Right now, we had the tip of the iceberg before, which was insomnia. Now all these panic attacks and everything. No, that's not the drugs. That's you. You're slipping into the vortex of incurable, DSM diagnosed mental illness. We're going to make a killing off you, and then you'll probably die an early death. What a wonderful doctor. Then you deal with the little games where, your tolerance goes up. And even with people who take pain pills, the same thing happens to them. And now they're addicts or junkies. But, getting back to the point, that process and the mechanisms work together. It can be more integrated. Like I said, when, you deal with someone who's a lifelong target and they get on paper as a child, but it's pretty much the same strategy, right? And so anytime that you even get evidence, getting back to the point, you're taking a chance. There's things that have happened to me where I had pretty good evidence that something was going on, but it's always the next question. And I talked about that with that individual that I was discussing, what we're going to talk about tonight in the live stream, is that, you get off on these rabbit trails because you're trying to explain all these different things that happen to targets. And that's part of the framework too, is that it's set up in such an unorthodox way. There's so many different little elements to it and unbelievable facets to what is happening to you. And it doesn't follow a logical motive. And so you're trying to explain it and you end up just looking even crazier. Oh, this happened, but before that happened, this other thing, and this other person did this, and then this happened. And then you look like some kind of factitious nut experiencing a persecutory delusion, or you're, on meth or something, right? But it all works together, right? All these things are within the scientific methodology of organized stalking and harassment. Very effective. So even if you're just using those themes without personal information, man, that's enough to change the way targets are processing information. They can start reading into things. They can start becoming hostile. And not only that, they're going to be stressed out to the point where they're not eating properly. I mean, it all fits together. It's like a snowball effect. You're waking up in the middle of the night having, conversations that have nothing to do with anything. You're constantly trying to solve this. And that's how they hijack the mind of a target, because they're taking over the environment. They're putting you into fight and flight. And you're designed in a way where, you have to organize things. Things have to make sense. You are compartmentalizing information. It's like the hot stove thing. Well, this happened because you screwed up and you can't screw up again. Except with gang stalking, it's not about not touching the hot stove because you don't know why it's happening. You don't even know why you're being targeted. A lot of targeted individuals don't have a criminal record. They don't have anything to hide. And so their brain is trying to organize all these things and take them back to homeostasis and make sense of all this weird stuff that is happening to them. And you can't do it because it doesn't make sense. Right. And so then, you have the problem where targets will get in to the online community and start becoming indoctrinated. And some of these people are just trying to help, I would imagine. But unfortunately, it goes into that area where it's exponential. Some of these people are perps. Some of these channels are fake. Some of the information and supposed, help that's out there is just a way to get in, infiltrate into your mind, throw these suggestions in with that framework of the themes and the harassment and get you to believe. Because why? Because they know that your brain is desperately trying to organize this stuff. And one of the comments that I get a lot from people, how do I make this stop? I just want to get my life back. I just want this. I just want to be normal again. And of course you do. And your brain does too. And now you're fighting with it. You're fighting with everybody. And, the problem is that, exponentially, that's going to wear you out and just feed in to discrediting targeted individuals, not to mention the fact that you've already been taken into a place of warranted suspicion, which I've gone along with that sensitization methodology, where you have a perceived unjust paranoia in your life because it just doesn't seem to be real. You're just overthinking everything. You're just paranoid. You got to relax. Maybe you should go get your head examined. But now, and then of course, now if you try to stick up for yourself, you're playing right into it again. Round and round we go. And the circular menagerie, that vortex of organized stalking and harassment. I'm going to go into the comments and see who's out here. New Neo, welcome. NC, welcome to the live stream. Okay. Nicholas Boserman, welcome to the live stream. Okay, you guys are having a good combo out there. Okay. Well, it looks like we have a comment here from Stagecraft. I'm going to go ahead and abbreviate that. Okay, so it looks like Stagecraft is talking about how they distract people, is what I'm assuming. And, it is a distraction. It's a huge distraction. And that's also part of it, because if you can't make sense, it's like the innuendos that targets deal with. We're talking about, last night's football game, or we're talking about something, but are we really talking about that? They'll do that to you. They'll come up and strike up a conversation about the weather with you or whatever, and then slip something in there and then just kind of wink at you. When you finally start catching on what they're talking about, it might be something that involves personal information. It might be something that is in your past, or something that is going to disturb you in a certain way, or even, prick your ego or something like that. Or maybe it might not even have anything to do with you. It might just follow the theme that you're supposed to believe that people think you're a drug dealer or a deviant or whatever. And so they don't have to have personal information. But of course, the whole thing was supposed to be surface level. And then you realize that there's an innuendo involved in it. And it's what are they trying to do? They're gonna drive you crazy because if you can't just have a normal conversation without exhausting yourself trying to figure out the hidden meaning in every little suggestion or conversation that you're in, right? You're gonna be too distracted. It's not gonna work. It's a short circuiting technique that they use. Going back into the comments. And it looks like NC says that Okay, I'm going to put that one up there, and we'll see what we've got in this. I had a psych doctor do my intake in the emergency department who was also a targeted individual from the Soviet Union. It was the first and only time I've ever met another TI in person. Wow, you got lucky on that one, man. That's pretty cool. I'm glad that you had that. And it almost makes you wonder if but they're, as a professional, they wouldn't be able to use that strategy to try and get information out of you. I would imagine that wouldn't be acceptable. So that's an anomaletic situation. That's interesting. Wow. It might even have been you that sorry about that I was referring to, one of the people. I remember that I've heard that from more than one person though. Okay. Oh, NC, that's another good one. Says they keep me stuck in the past. Right. Right. And by being in the present and are stealing my future. And I might as well put that one up there too. You got some pretty good comments. You're way up on the strategy of these perps. And you should probably have a channel at this point, it sounds like to me. Unless you do. I don't know if you do or not. And we'll go ahead and put that comment up here. They keep me stuck in the past by being in the present and are stealing my future. All three phases of my time belong to them. Exactly. They are hijacking everything, and that's what they do to everybody. That's a real good point. That's excellent. They're going to have a hard time with you. The thing is that you can still know that you're being messed with, but this just that the tyranny is exponential to the point where you can figure out what's happening, but at the same time you still have all the same dilemmas to deal with, and it's a mechanism. Like I said, your brain is desperately trying to organize the data and solve everything to take you back to homeostasis. And I've talked about that before. That you do need to have environmental authority and try to find homeostasis. I don't care if your life before was an illusion, which it was, in the sense that if you're one of those targets who did not know that these things existed, that all of a sudden, you feel like you're on the Truman Show, or that the whole world has turned against you. And we've talked about, some of those things that are out there within the framework of society, right? And it's no joke. I mean, you have the secret societies, and you have government programs, CIA, MK Ultra, FBI, COINTELPRO, organized stalking, cognitive warfare, multi-domain warfare, counterterrorism. You have assassination teams. You got all kinds of things out there, and you have the Stasi stuff. Targets talk about. You have the Zertzenzug or whatever, where people are literally, their houses are broken into, the games are being played, similar to the Lutheran Synod and I put that up there on one of my other videos, that there's documented cases of this stuff out there, but targets are dealing with this and they're hijacked. But the point is that your normal life or whatever, or the homeostasis that you had before was based on, just basically a lack of, the realistic, a realistic worldview. Sorry, there's a dog barking right now. Hopefully you guys can't hear that. It kind of distracted me a little bit, but that's what you're going to be dealing with. Right. And, to be distracted and taken back into the past or speculating in the future is part of that framework. And it's a classic technique, because I wonder if it's going to happen again. I wonder what they're going to do next. I wonder, you get a direct to conversation where, we're going to give you cancer, or we're going to do this, or you're going to be in a mental institution, or we're going to kill you, or we're going to do this, or we're going to hurt somebody in your family. A lot of targets, they might get to the place where they don't even care. They want to die. They're just being tortured so much. And so they start scaring them by, threatening to hurt family or something that they care about, or something like that. because they want you to be in that state of anticipation where you're trying to figure these things out, and they have all the authority because it's guerrilla warfare. It's asymmetrical warfare, and you don't know when it's going to happen next. And that goes back into the strategy and the methodology that I talked about before, where you have the framework change, where it's well, I don't know, maybe it stopped. I don't know. It's getting more aggressive. I don't know what to think, and so it's just confusion, taking you into the past. Okay, you're flipping back and forth within those amalgamated associations that I've talked about before. Is that what do? They invade your mind. Now you got triggers. You got triggers everywhere. It's like living in a room full of spikes. You move one way, you move the other way, and it's like you can't go anywhere. It's like we're here to remind you. It's always going to remind you. There's always something there to remind me. I'm not going to sing for you because I can't, obviously, but that's, and then, that song will come on the radio right about the time you're trying to snap out of it. But that's the method. And then you're in the past, right? And it's not uncommon for me to catch myself being distracted to where I might wake up. It's, one of those things where you wake up at 3 a.m. and it's like these thoughts are just popping into your head. You know that it's not from you, and it's not a coincidence. And even that conversation I had with one of the TIs earlier today is that they've been dealing with an illness, right? And they were talking about the fact that they're not trying to be short with people. They're not trying to be impatient, but they don't have the energy. They're sick, and you end up snapping at people, or you end up becoming crabby, or just, you're just too tired to deal with anything. And, when you get attacked in your sleep, which is another strategy, because you're vulnerable. And of course, not only are people dealing with break-ins to where they'll do stuff to you at night, that really shake you up, but you're just vulnerable, right? And so, it's even an interrogation tactic. I'm pretty sure, right? It's just basic interrogation. If somebody is off their game, you take advantage of it, or people are shot up with drugs like truth serum or whatever. It's the same thing. But you have those intrusive thoughts. Trying to separate the signal from the noise is important. Trying to gain that homeostasis, not realizing that you're within their menagerie, right? You're turning into their little puppet. They're attaching strings. It's almost like that Hellraiser movie where they have those hooks that are attached to those chains, and it just comes out and grabs you, and they're just trying to rip you apart. Because that's really the methodology of the invasion of the psyche. They are creating a type of scaffolding or a framework within your mind that will take you into the past, that will take you into the future, and the present is gone. Your ability to focus, your ability to concentrate is gone, and it does play in heavily to discrediting, to assassinating the character of the target individual. I'm going to go back into some more comments here, and I'm kind of going in reverse right now. I'm just looking. Sentinel, welcome to the live stream. Emmanuel Godson, welcome. Okay, so now we're up to them. We're going to go back to the bottom. Exalt, welcome to the live stream. Okay, that's a pretty good one. We're going to put that one up there. From Exalt 6265, because ultimately it's out of your control. So why try and control things you can't? I just live my life and keep my passions. Okay, that's a great way to just keep it simple. And that's really what you need to do, because they want to make your life complicated. You got this ordeal, you got that ordeal, you got this problem, you got this, you can't control this, you've got to fix that. You'll go nuts. It's Vampire 101 at that point, right? And so what do? Well, you want to try to cancel it out. You want to try to neutralize these things and use simplicity. Very, very good advice. You just keep it simple. Things that you can control. Things that that are going to help you, even when there's something going on that is painful, that is stressing you out. But rather than to get caught in the meat grinder of it and let that hijack your energy and your mind, well, I'm just going to try and be healthy today. I'm just going to try and focus on maybe doing some exercise, because you get so strung out, you get so, distracted and diverted and all this stuff, that at the end of the day, you're not getting anything done. It happens to me. It's like, man, or I might even be on a delivery or trying to do my job, and I'm thinking about something, and it's like, you drop it. You just focus on what you're doing right now, because that's the exponential tactic that they use. And I've talked about the fact that it's kind of like having a stock portfolio. Don't get worried about not making a whole lot of money. Just try not to lose all of it. Right. Just, that's what they want. They want everything. Like, they want the target to have a falling out of individuals who are not even after them, because of the reciprocity of the harassment, the paranoia, the fact that they're just, drained of energy. They just can't deal with it, or they feel like they're being minimized. Everything is different for the target. And then they want them, to lose their jobs. They want them in financial destitution. They want them in complete isolation. They want them in hopelessness. They want them in fight or flight mode. They want to control you completely. That's good advice, though. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's see here. All right. And we'll put this comment up here. Let's see what this is from NC. Anyone know anyone else? I don't know about anyone else, excuse me, but I'm dealing with a fraternal organization that keeps trying to blackmail me, but I told them everything, and they keep making things up and inserting things into my head. Okay. Well, that's a huge I don't know. That's something that a lot of targets will talk about, especially when it comes to trying to figure out how these resources are pulled together to do this stuff. And there's a lot of explanations for that. Sometimes it is a fraternal organization, or sometimes you're just being led to believe it is. It's like when targets are led to believe that their neighbors are controlling them through V2K or something. And that's just a trick to get them to, that character assassination, or to get them to do something, and then, they're crazy or whatever. But assuming that you know what's going on, because you said you're being blackmailed, I've heard of that kind of thing before. In fact, I was watching a documentary earlier today where you get into the billionaires club, right? I'm not going to mention any names because I don't want to make any powerful people angry with me. But this guy, basically, he wrote a book on this. I don't remember what it is. And he actually tried to get it off Amazon because he's had several attempts on his life. But of course, it was the elites. And he went into several things involving that framework, where there was rituals, there was things that I won't even talk about on the channel going on, to where even you would have to kill somebody that was close to you and dip like a silk handkerchief in the blood at their last dying breath and give it to the elders as a type of currency to become part of this fraternal organization. I mean, this is beyond. Chase this guy out into the woods. He had to, go hide out, cash in on I think it was some type of a policy that he had money in. And he just went and, did it. I think it was $100,000 and basically went on the run. But there are people out there that talk about that stuff. Those things are real. You have the foundations of that starting out with Freemasonry. And it's just like I said before, it's not that Freemasons are gang stalking targets, but the thing is that there's also a spiritual component to the world, and there's a spiritual component to a lot of those organizations, especially the one that I just referenced, which I'm not going to mention. But you get up into those, higher levels of those fraternities, and you're not playing any games anymore. It's real. It's serious. And sometimes I think the stalkers will try and get you to believe that kind of stuff, though, too. But when you experience the gang stalking and you experience the exponential tyranny in your environment, I mean, there's only so many different ways to explain it. And, there's different ways that people can be hijacked. In fact, I was talking about that with that target, that it's not that the CIA or the FBI or maybe the Freemasons or the Illuminati are getting a hold of someone. It could happen that way. But it could just be, like this gentleman was talking about, things are just popping into your mind, right? Or, because even when you get into some of the things involving spiritual oppression, that is very similar to what a lot of people talk about, that they will have intrusive thoughts, or they will be getting that type of voice to skull, or, whatever, sound to ear, or maybe even demonic voices or whatever. That is, it's like they have to become engaged with it. It's just another way to distract the target. And then, of course, you're speculating on a lot of different levels, to where if they can do that, what else can they do? Right? Can they read people's thoughts? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things that we just don't know. The technology has been around for quite a while for this stuff, and then we find out about it later, after who knows how many thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of people or tens of millions of people probably have been diagnosed as having a mental disease, when really it was just a type of subtle harassment that started to invade their life. Maybe they started having those intrusive thoughts, similar to NC, and you start having maybe anxiety attacks or depression or insomnia or whatever. And at that point, if it's subtle, you're not going to be dealing with the stuff that targeted individuals are dealing with, and you're going to be more apt to think it's you. Right. The blessing that you have as a target, if that's going to sound kind of crazy, is that that this stuff is so aggressive that it's not you. The problem, like I said earlier, is separating the signal from the noise, because sometimes, it's almost like they'll create those psychological oikotarians within your mind. It's like they install a chat bot in your mind through psychic driving, to where it echoes. It's like you listen to a song one too many times and you just can't get it out of your head. And they'll do that to targets. That's what psychic driving is. And you're running around, and then, it's just, because like I said, many times we're image bearers, we're created in the image of God, but we're also like clay. And so in the sense that, independently, without God's assistance, we're like computers. We can just be programmed, and you really have to fight this stuff. It's a very effective way to gaslight and use mind control to manipulate someone. You get them to think certain things about themselves. And then you have the disinformation and the invasion of psychiatry and all that other stuff. And you get somebody with subtle harassment. They're having, maybe thoughts every now and again. They're having nightmares. They're having depression. They're being moody. Better go see the shrink. You're crazy. Now you get on meds, and now you might even be more vulnerable to the tactics, because it's so subtle. Thank God, literally, that you're being attacked. That's one of the blessings, and I've talked about that before for targets, that, if you have an aggressive day of harassment, man, it sucks. I get it, okay? I'm not saying that you have to pretend like everything is okay, but you can flip that around. Why? Because inevitably, along with the way that they flip the harassment around for a lot of people, it's like they think that it stopped. They want you to start believing that you're just crazy. They want you to start reading into things to where you question yourself exponentially, to where you don't know. And then the directed conversations will change. Well, yeah, you got driven crazy, but now you are crazy. And it's like, well, so what's the difference? Target. What's the difference? We drove you crazy. What's your point? Now, what are you going to do about it? And then you just even get more angry about the whole thing. So it's, the thing is, though, you have to know. And so if you do have that aggressive day, know for one that they want you to react and they don't want to get aggressive. That's probably something they are doing to get your attention because they want to flip you through that emotional manipulation, right? They want to see how you react. They're gathering data when they do that stuff too, right? But if you don't react, well, that's not good. They don't like that at all. And they don't like it when they have to get aggressive because now, man, trying to convince you that you're reading into it is not an option, right? That's not good gaslighting at all. And your job is to neutralize these things, period, 100%. Okay, I'm going to go back in here. All right. Steve the Pigeon. Oh my gosh. It's the very early morning hours for our night owl, Steve the Pigeon. Welcome to the live stream. I thought I saw you up here. Where'd you go? Okay, there you went. There's a couple comments that came in there. You disappeared on me. Let's see what Steve is doing out there. Our brains want answers, but the answers are hidden. So rather than speculate, just have to learn to let it be. That's great advice, Steve. Absolutely. And that's hard to do though sometimes, isn't it? They want because it's they've got that environmental control and they have leverage. Why do they? Because there's things you need, unfortunately. You got to live. You don't want to be out on the street. You want to have a friend. You want people you can talk to. You want people you can share with. You want to get that, normal dopamine and chemical reaction in your brain that you need, right? As a human being. And I've talked about the MK Ultra deprivation chamber. One of the most heinous things that a lot of these people would talk about. There's just no stimuli. And there you are with all these things bouncing around in your head. And, it's like the equivalency. I think there's a challenge out there. I don't know if it's up in the Alps or something where they got this house where they've got, booze and everything up there. It's way out in the middle of nowhere. But I don't think you can watch TV or listen to the radio or anything. It's just dead quiet. And they will literally give you, I don't know, it's like $1 million or something like that. If you can live up there for, 6 months or something without losing your mind. I probably have the details wrong. I don't know if you guys know, but supposedly nobody's been able to do it, because it's that deprivation, the silence, the isolation, and so on and so forth. So they have leverage. There's things you need. And your brain is wired in a way where you need rewards to keep up your morale. It's like, you can call it whatever you want. You almost wonder if they have names for these things, like a bartender, the caged eagle. It's just throw them, this talent. A lot of targets are pretty talented. We'll just throw you in a cage, Yeah, we don't have to do anything else to you. We'll just, box you in, isolate you, get you, in a conversation with yourself, flipping from the past to the future, trying to regain homeostasis, and we'll just watch you go crazy because your brain is wired that way. The deprivation methodology is exponential. And you even run into some of that stuff when you get into the, some of the false stuff out there in the churches, in those cults, because the spirits and the people in the hierarchy of those organizations, they have that authority. They give out the affirmation. And in the spiritual dimension, they control who gets happy and who gets afflicted or whatever, right? And so they have that environmental control to convince people that if you do this is the reward you're going to get. But for some reason, you're just not up there. It's like the prosperity gospel or other things. They're the unconditional election of the Calvinists. You just I don't know God must not like you. You're not one of the elect, or you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. It's like the Job equation. You must have done something wrong, Job. And he's, no, I didn't. And he's arguing with his friends out there, scraping the boils with that potsherd as they're trying to tell him to confess something that he hadn't done. And, they're supposed to be out there comforting him. But it's the same thing. And they can dysregulate people. And sometimes targets will talk about the fact that they believe they've been hit by a directed energy weapon. In fact, there was a guy that made a video about that. I was watching that somebody pulled up behind him in a vehicle, and all of a sudden he got, heart palpitations and anxiety and so on and so forth. You don't know. You don't know what it is, because I've mentioned this before. I believe that, the spiritual dimension uses technology to do that to people. It's not all just, ghouls and ghosts and everything else and, shadow creatures and stuff. A lot of people will talk about, even that guy that was talking about the fraternity, I guess he started seeing that kind of thing. I'm not saying that stuff isn't real. I'm not saying you're not going to deal with that. But the thing is, they can use that kind of manipulation, and they can try to create propositional tyranny within their victim and control them, So, no, but Steve is right that sometimes you just have to let it be. Sometimes it's hard to do that. Thanks for that, Steve. Hopefully you're doing well, and Merry Christmas. Okay. I'm going up here in the comments again. All right. Okay, this is a pretty good comment from NC. Let's see what this is here. The worst part is the slander that gets ordinary people like coworkers to participate. The coworkers or people around you are fed disinformation, and they think they are doing humanity a service. Oh yeah. Well, right. Yeah, right. Or sometimes, the contradiction is that people are going to do that, but really they're just getting money. And I've mentioned before that if people were out there in that type of star chamber, scenario, if you guys watch that old movie, to where they kind of just delved out justice apart from the legal system, which is kind of what you're talking about, that they would go after some people who were really doing some nasty stuff, not you. And as NC has said, it's disinformation. And, so, what do? They'll use that as an excuse. So sometimes I don't even think they believe it. I don't even think all these perps believe some of that BS. They just either want the money or they want the social status because you've been selected as a scapegoat. And I've talked about the social dynamics. Once you're painted, people, they're just frustrated enough to need a scapegoat. There's just enough social awkwardity within the workplace to where you're that needed component, that piece of the puzzle, to where they can just dump everything on you, blame everything on you, vent on you, and keep everybody off their behind because it's you. Sometimes I don't even think they believe it. But I get you on that one. Absolutely. Okay. Let's go back in here. All right. And Exalt, looks like you're agreeing with me on that. Mindy's meanderings. I think that's correct. Welcome to the live stream. Jefferson Thomas, welcome. And I'm a little behind on these. I'm just trying to catch up with you guys. Okay. And Mindy says people are deceived and greedy. Yeah, yeah, they are. Yes, they are. And Mindy also says gang stalkers are not good people. Nope. Those two things are definitely, not gonna meld together very well. Yeah, fire and ice on that one. That's but really you can't underscore that comment because I'm gonna put that up there because that's more important than you think. because they will gaslight the target, or they will even use things from your past or whatever and try to get you to believe that you deserve it and that they're the good ones. They'll try to, get you to believe that they have justification to do it. So that comment is really, I think I underestimated that. That's actually a lot more important. And, when you get into this menagerie, as you experience the sequelae of the harassment, it's like what I said earlier, you can start to lose patience. Sometimes you start snapping at people that don't deserve it. Sometimes you start reading into things. Your job performance goes down. Everything starts to be affected by it. And if it goes on long enough and it goes on consistently enough, and it's some targets will believe it. And it just depends, on the environmental tyranny. And like I said, if it's subtle, if it's a lot more subtle, that's even worse almost, because it's like that guy that I referenced several times in my videos that thought he was schizophrenic, because he wasn't getting, harassed to the point where people were letting him know, we're going to drive you crazy. They would just do things like the stuff targets deal with in directed conversations or unorthodox behavior or, street theater. But he wasn't, nobody was breaking in and drugging him or, threatening that we're gonna lobotomize you or we're gonna give you cancer. There was none of that. It was just, that type of environmental tyranny. And, through that process, not only did he believe that he was ill mentally, but his self-esteem was in the crapper. The guy was really down on himself, and he was always apologizing. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what my problem is. And they had him completely beaten down, man. And it was a positive revelation for that individual to figure out that he was not hallucinating. These people were harassing him, and I don't remember how long. It was a month or two. I think it was a couple months. Because when I met him, he said that he was schizophrenic, and I asked him, well, what's up with that? And he said, well, I just imagine people are doing these things and saying these things. And I'm like, oh, wow. And it's some of his family too. But then, of course, he was isolated. He didn't have any friends at all. He was basically like the classic target, surrounded by perps wherever he went, family, workplace, everywhere, except me. And, he's like, you've never done this to me. If I was hallucinating, man, I would have hallucinated that you would have done it too, right? That's just, deductive reasoning. And of course, at that point, we figured it out that, a lot of targets are dealing with that. But you can believe the lie that they are the good people, that they have the justification within that framework of that gaslighting. Frank, welcome to live stream. Okay. Well, guys, unfortunately, I'm starting to have that throat pain. I do have a throat nodule, and I've been trying to use a little bit different technique when I'm speaking. In fact, one of the TI friends that I talked to had suggested that I speak with more, use more air when I'm speaking. It does help a little bit. And so I appreciate that advice, by the way, Nick. But we're going to end the live stream now. But we're going to recap some of these things. Targeted individuals are dealing with the science of gang stalking, and the smear campaign, the character is assassination, is there to hide the illegal activity, to protect the perpetrators, and to gaslight the victim. And, I'm just going to keep it simple tonight, because you guys had some real good advice that you just want to simplify things. Steve the Pigeon, other people talked about that, to focus on things that you can control, that are going to help you out, rather than letting them make your life complicated, and realizing that, these perps have commonalities, and we'll do, a show on those guys too. I don't know, maybe tomorrow night or in the near future. And that the attack that they are, the fact that they are attacking you is their Achilles heel. They are the aggressors. They are the ones accusing you based on a legal framework that they are violating. not only in the natural, but spiritually. Okay. They're not supposed to be doing these types of things. They are not supposed to be breaking the law. And they are certainly supposed to, even if you did do something wrong, we'll say you're one of those targets who's got something nasty in your past, or you screwed up, or I don't care. They don't have the right to do that. It's illegal. It's not within the laws of the land. And it violates all the spiritual laws, because you are supposed to be merciful. Because why? Because everyone, no matter how good they try to pretend they are, or try to, stomp around you, they're in need of mercy. And because they're not giving that to you, and they're being very contradictive, you know that they are evil. As Mindy has said, I'd like to thank our moderators. I'd like to thank all of you guys. And I'd like to encourage people to join the channel, support the channel. I do make exclusive content. I don't want to, throw a bunch of stuff out there and try to look like I'm coercing people into getting a membership, but I will do that from time to time. And there's other videos out there that are members only, but it's up to you. I want to have this stuff available to everyone. God bless. Be good to yourselves. Be safe.